Hello, everybody. How are we today? Welcome in, welcome in. It's very nice to see all of you here in the chat. I'm sure there will be more that pour in as we start to get the show on the road. But to everybody that is here, welcome to Conversations with Authors. Today we bring to you Jan Chozen Bays, the author of Mindful Medicine, in conversation with Laura Jomon Martin. But before we get to our authors and speakers properly, please allow me to welcome you back to Conversations with Authors. If you've seen one of these events before, we're glad to see you. And if you're new here, then Book Passage is an independently run bookstore out of the San Francisco Bay Area. We host and run book talks just like these very often throughout the week. As we're now streaming on YouTube, and we'll continue to do so in the future, please consider subscribing by clicking the subscribe button below. Completely free and helps us out a lot. If you'd like to check out our upcoming events, or like the idea of receiving our email newsletter, you can find both of those at bookpassage.com. And if you'd like to check out our speaker's book, which is, again, Mindful Medicine, you can find it using the very first link in the description below, or also at bookpassage.com. And finally, this one's very important, if you have any questions tonight, please take the time to write them in the YouTube chat. This is the only way to get your questions to our speakers today, so don't miss your chance. Now please allow me to introduce Jan Chozen Bays, who is a Zen master in the White Plum lineage of the late master Taizan Maizumi Roshi. She serves as a priest and teacher in the Jizo Mountain Great Vow Zen Monastery in Oregon. She's also a pediatrician who specializes in the evaluation of children for abuse and neglect. She's the author of several books, including Mindfulness on the Go, a very excellent seller in our ferry building store, and Mindful Eating. In conversation tonight, we have Laura Jomon Martin, who is certified by the Center for Mindfulness at UMass Medical School to teach mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR. Laura has been teaching mindfulness professionally since 2002 and has been an MBSR instructor since 2009. She is a dedicated student of Zen Buddhism, a clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience. She has a golden retriever named Louis, who prefers walking meditation. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Now, please allow me to hand it over to our speakers. Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody.
Yes, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Nick, for making it happen.
Yeah.
for all of your technical support and pep talks behind the scenes. So it's wonderful to get to be in conversation with you, Jan. I'll call you Jan in this context, if that's okay.
Sure.
You and I have been working together for a while now, teaching mindfulness and working with healthcare professionals. But thank you so much for writing this book and bringing it out into the world in this extremely portable way. It seems to have come at just the perfect time. And so I think maybe the first question to begin with would be, why did you write the book at this time?
Well, actually, I've been concerned about burnout in healthcare professionals for some time. And it actually was triggered by my own experience with burnout. And because this is supposed to be a sort of a book reading, I'm going to read you a little section from the book about my own experience, which I didn't know at the time was burnout. I know about physician burnout from the inside. I know about compassion fatigue and secondary trauma from the inside. I suddenly fell into these distressing states of heart and mind, despite my 45 years of sustained Zen meditation practice, and despite all the markings of a successful career. And then I talk about publishing and teaching and so on. I had a happy marriage and a family life and a lifelong, cheerful and curious approach to everything I encountered. I'm basically kind of Pollyanna type person. How did this happen? When I had been doing child abuse work full-time for 10 years, my father suddenly died of a stroke, and then my Zen teacher of 20 years also died. It's common for healthcare professionals to be able to maintain a demanding work schedule, coping well with frequent emergencies and tragedies, until something falls apart in their personal lives. One Friday night, after a week of particularly horrible child abuse cases, I was driving home 2 hours late because of a last-minute emergency rape exam on a teenager. A soppy country song began on the radio, and I found myself crying and afraid I would not be able to stop. Over the next few weeks, I lost my appetite and began coming into work late, just 5 or 10 minutes, but late. I noticed that I was reactive. I was irritated with the coworkers who were my best friends. A call would come in from detectives at 5:15 p.m. asking if they could bring in an emergency case, and I found myself making any excuse to send the child to the emergency room or have somebody see them the next day. When our evaluations helped authorities remove children from abusive homes, I saw some kids return to our program after suffering worse abuse in their foster home than in their family home. And I began to wonder if our work was truly helpful or not. I needed to understand what was happening to me. I needed a diagnosis, which is also, very critical in medicine to know what's going on. So I began to read. I discovered that I had all the symptoms of burnout. I had physical and emotional exhaustion. I had depression. I had depersonalization, like, oh, not another case of this or that, and doubt in personal efficacy. Burnout can happen to anyone in any profession, but it is particularly common among healthcare workers, emergency responders, and mental health and addiction specialists. When I realized the nature of my trouble, I also realized that I was likely the most resilient, equanimous person in the child abuse center where I was the medical director. If I was struggling emotionally and physically, I needed to learn about what was happening to me, the nature of my illness and the treatment, so that I could help myself and support my colleagues. Over the past 20 years, I've studied and lectured on burnout and developed mindfulness practices for people who work in the caring professions. And these are practices that can provide sustained well-being, and most importantly, don't take extra time out of your day. So we'll talk about that and emphasize that later. So when I began reading about burnout, I discovered that each occupation has certain occupational hazards, and that's often how I begin my talks with groups when I'm teaching about burnout. And our profession has the occupational hazards of secondary trauma, of compassion, or now we're calling it empathy fatigue, and burnout. And the cost of this is really high. We lose more than one doctor and one nurse each day in the US to suicide, which adds up to more than two to three full classes of doctors and nurses, full graduating classes of doctors and nurses each year. I also knew that I could not have sustained my work in the child abuse field, where we were seeing between 100 and 120 kids a month for child abuse, if I didn't have an ongoing mindfulness and meditation practice. And when I began to burn out, I realized what I had to do is what I call adjusting the dose. So adjusting the dose to the severity of the burnout meant I needed more time for practice, rather than our usual instinct is less time for practice when we're busy. I needed ways to let go of the suffering that I had just encountered working with one patient, clear my heart, mind, and then go on and see the next patient fresh. And the pandemic, of course, has made things worse. The people are quitting a profession that they loved. And some hospitals are having, like a hospital in Oregon that really got smashed during the COVID epidemic, and in Eastern Oregon is now having to close some of their units because they can't find the staff, because people are quitting because they are burning out. So for a long time, this idea of a book has been percolating in my mind. And then when we hit the pandemic, and when we were working with our own mindful medicine group on Wednesday nights, I thought there's really an acute need for this. So then we began using those practices with our group. They were like our test customers, and then they got refined, and the ones that they liked, we kept in the book. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it evolved out of necessity and then became this very organic sharing process. And it has been road tested over the years, hasn't it?
And you've been part of that.
Indeed, we've gotten to do it together, which has been really wonderful. And I have learned so much from the people that we've been able to encounter in this process, which has been, while it started with just physicians, we now get to see a great many different professions and medical professionals, including veterinarians and dentists. And there's not a aspect, first responders, there's not an area that isn't affected, and also that can't benefit in many ways from these. So we'll talk, I think I'd like to make sure we get to talk about certainly how we got here, and many of the issues that healthcare professionals are facing right now. It's important to, and also make sure we do get to look at what's being addressed here as well, and get to hopefully hear some questions from people that are here tonight. And we'll maybe do a practice, if you would lead us in a practice at
a sample
okay.
practice, that'd be great.
Yeah, great. So speaking of the particular audience and the variety of professionals that we do get to see, there's a lot of variety in the folks that we see, but also some things that they might share in common that are unique to healthcare providers, that make them perhaps particularly susceptible to some of the stressors or difficulties. It may have been their personality or the training or the experiences. And those can be perhaps like a double-edged sword, that are both what brought them and makes them successful at what they do, but also can be a detriment. Can you maybe speak to some of that?
Yes, it is a two-edged sword. So I think most people start medicine with a very strong sense of personal mission or vow, a desire to help reduce the pain and suffering of others. but to the point of neglecting your own health. And I also have discovered that many people enter medicine because they had a personal experience themselves or someone that they loved and cared for either died or had a very serious illness, and kind of a desire to get control over something that seemed uncontrollable. So we sometimes delve into that in our mindful medicine group. So this desire to end suffering drives us, but then we end up suffering ourselves. Then I think the second kind of item here, factor, is impossibility of the task, because human pain and suffering are endless and you can never do enough. But you keep trying, so you stretch yourself thinner by working, volunteering after hours to work in a free clinic because there's so much need there. And we get into what I call the algebra of suffering. So if there's n amount of suffering in the world, and as we're working with that suffering, we begin suffering more. Now there's n+1 suffering in the world. And our goal is not to add to the suffering of the world, and certainly not to make ourselves suffer, because we're the people who can help. So please remember the algebra of suffering. I have to bring it to my own mind periodically. I think the third factor is that our training involves self-sacrifice. We work long hours, both in training and at our jobs. We work holidays. I remember being surprised. Oh yeah, people get sick on Christmas and people get sick on New Year's, and somebody's got to work those times. After school, going to school where you had summers off and so on. It was kind of a shock. And then you miss important events, family events or events with friends, like a baseball game or your kids' play at school or birthday parties. And then eventually guilt builds up, like, gosh, I'm not a very good parent. And even resentment, like, I hate this job that makes me work this hard. And then I think the corporate nature of medicine. So this is something I've been pondering a lot, and I remember exactly when it changed in our hospital, which was originally a religious-based hospital. And it changed when they went fancy and started talking about market share. And I'm thinking, market share of child abuse and satisfaction surveys among parents who've abused their child. I don't think that's going to work in our clinic. But they also remodeled the lobby at our hospital with huge stained glass windows, beautiful furniture, gorgeous wood. And I just thought, I wonder how much healthcare we could have given for this amount of show. And there's just a constant push now for productivity and for quotas. We had one person in our mindful medicine group on Wednesday nights. I think she's a family practitioner or an internist, one or the other. And she came just crestfallen because she said she had this glorious day where she saw every patient in the allotted amount of time. At 5:30, they finished. She and her nurse gave each other a high five, like, good job. And then a few minutes later, an administrator called her into her office and said, you're not meeting your quota, your productivity quota. And she was just absolutely crushed. And so some people are stepping out of that, which is one possibility, and going into private practice and just taking all the time that they need and not making very much money and not winning very much fame. But they've made that decision. They don't want to be allotted 8 minutes per patient. Then I think another factor is fear of making mistakes. So there are very few professions where there's a constant awareness. If I make a mistake, I could make somebody sick, I could maim them, I could kill them. And those professions are really the healthcare professions, and emergency responders are at the top of the list. And the suicide rate is very high in both of those professions that I mentioned. So people develop what we call a rampant inner critic, a voice inside that's constantly putting them down and worrying about making mistakes, and has a filing cabinet of all the mistakes you made in the past, which it keeps beating you up with. And that can really erode one's sense of joy in work. And there's a whole chapter in the book on the inner critic. And now, finally, a lot of hospitals and even clinics have realized that their healthcare workers are in trouble and need some help. So they've added resiliency training or mindfulness training to that workload. And so after work, when you're ready to go home and you finally finish charting and time to go home, you're supposed to stay for an extra hour or so and take a mindfulness training. And there's some nice satires actually on the web now.
Mandatory mindfulness.
Mandatory mindfulness, and people trying to escape once they realize what it is. There's a local doctor in Oregon who has a pseudonym, Dr. Glaucum Fleckens. He's an ophthalmologist, but he does these great satires on these kinds of things. So, you know, you could be at home de-stressing by playing your guitar or playing with Legos with your kids or going to a movie. And instead you have to sit in a mandatory mindfulness training or resiliency training. And then you have the sneaking feeling that, oh, the reason for these trainings is to increase my productivity and make me not complain. So that's one of the reasons that we develop practices that refresh the heart mind while you're at work and can be fit into a busy day without adding any extra time. So for example, a mindful walking path down a corridor that you traverse maybe 8-10 times a day. You can turn that sometimes into a mindful walking path where you just let everything go out of your heart mind and just pay attention to walking. Or another favorite is wash your mind while you wash your hands, because we have to wash our hands so many times during the day or sanitize our hands. And so if, as you're doing that, you just become quiet and let go of all the thoughts and the last patient, then you can refresh yourselves over and over again and then connect to the next patient. And it makes, you know, it's the research on the benefits of mindfulness for healthcare professionals is huge. There are actually 200 references crammed in the back of the book, because I know healthcare professionals like evidence-based information. For example, if you try some of the practices that help you connect to your patients better, like asking about pets is a favorite. It turns out that patients' fears are two. Depersonalization is top, and second is loss of control. And if we can connect to them as individuals, they feel like they've been seen. And the research shows that when we connect to patients as individuals, that they will follow our advice, our treatment advice, more often than if mindfulness isn't brought in, these ways to connect through mindfulness.
So some of the practices in the book are designed to refresh the practitioner and things that the practitioner can do just to be responsive to their own experience. And then some of the practices are to rekindle or reconnect with the patient, to really rehumanize that relationship with the patient, which may have been the very reason people went into the field in the first place, or the thing that they missed the most. Yeah.
Yes, I went into medicine because I thought, this is self-confession, but I was working as a volunteer in a hospital, and they sent me out to interview people who were waiting in the waiting room. And I realized, oh my gosh, people will tell you anything. You can find out all about all these interesting people if you're a doctor or a nurse.
Well, if you have a
but then if you get burned out, you're just like, oh, not another diabetic who's out of control. So then you kind of lose the joy that you had of connecting with people.
And I think that speaks to the the curiosity that is a really life-giving way of being. And if we lose that curiosity, then that's a sign. That's often a sign of burnout, for sure.
Very much so.
Yeah, that depersonalization. So I just want to touch a little bit further on the mandatory mindfulness part. And there's a way that I think uh, something that's kind of gotten out there is this uh, mistrust of mindfulness because it maybe has become corporatized or made mandatory. It's kind of fun even on some platforms to kind of dunk on mindfulness a little bit, but what can we reasonably expect these practices to deliver? And what is your experience of the practices that you're sharing and how these may really be impacting the people who take them up?
Yeah. Well, I think you and I have seen them work in our mindful medicine group over the years we've been crowd testing them.
Yeah.
For example, talking with patients about what's working well. Because as healthcare professionals, we usually come in the room, we look at the chart and we say, oh, your blood work's back. Oh my goodness, your liver enzymes are high. How much are you drinking? And or, oh gosh, your A1C is not good. What are you eating? And people feel attacked. They're kind of dread going to the doctor because the doctor's going to scold them for something. So the practice of beginning with what's working would go like this. Oh, wow, look at this. Your kidneys are doing this great job of balancing all your electrolytes, your sodium and potassium, and, clearing the extra material out of your blood that you don't need anymore. And your pancreas is working really great. Your pancreas is continually monitoring your blood sugar and putting the right amount of insulin into your bloodstream to keep your blood sugar under control, and it's doing a great job. Now, I see that you're a little anemic, so I think maybe we need to give you a little iron or increase the iron in your diet. Just tell me about what you're eating these days. And when people shifted to that approach, they said that it developed a feeling of trust and rapport with their patients that then helped the rest of the conversation about the difficulties go well. So, often in corporate, they say, sandwich the good, what's working, with the difficult, and then what's working. So
A sandwich.
it's that idea. It's basically that idea brought into medicine. The research is abundant that mindfulness really helps people in healthcare improve their sense of well-being, their sense of efficacy, and it even reduces errors in clinics where they've done controlled studies. I think that we have to ask, why are many people leaving the healthcare profession? And people tell me they've been working for 20 years and they love the profession and enjoyed it, but now they're leaving. And I think that when you do these mindfulness practices and bring them in every day, there's a kind of energy in beginner's mind, like curiosity, like you were mentioning, that's brought back into your interactions. So we would like to turn irritation into curiosity. We would like to turn depression into equanimity. And we would like to turn clock watching into a sense of flow, so that you get through the end of the day and go, wow, that went fast. But some people need to step out. And so I talk to social workers in the child abuse field and healthcare professionals about, you've got a lot of training, you've got a lot of talents that can be transferred sideways. So police officers can become social workers. Social workers who are burnt out doing child abuse cases can do adoptions for a while. So there's always ways to transfer what you know. You can start working in a 9-to-5 clinic that doesn't have any weekend hours. You can join the Flying Doctors and Nurses or Doctors Without Borders. It's just, we get kind of hemmed into, it's this job or else I've failed. But it doesn't have to be that way. Now, Laura, we've talked about this a lot. You want to talk about the wheels, the wheels coming off?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important to acknowledge that healthcare workers are leaving in droves. And there's just this hemorrhaging of just even to think of one experienced nurse leaving their unit and the effect that has. I think this makes it harder, I think, for professionals to leave because they know what that means, that there is a level of expertise that really matters, especially to new professionals coming in. And so when we just think of the hemorrhaging of this level of expertise, it is kind of scary to think about. And so but it is an important discernment for professionals who may need to leave, who may need to step out, that has to be uh, within the realm of possibility, or to make a lateral move, or to just have a little more. We can get into black and white thinking, uh, especially when we're so very stressed and have been for so long. We were concerned about this before the pandemic. We kind of thought it was bad before.
Right.
And we were starting to really like, wow, the suicidality rates, this is really getting terrible. And then the pandemic hit. And you know what? All these professionals just set that aside and showed up.
Yeah.
But it's not sustainable. And so either, often I've seen these practices be very effective and helpful for people who use them, and it can be a lifeline. Um, and it may be time to go somewhere else. It may be time to do something else too.
And she knows of what she speaks because she has she's a therapist and has a number of clients who are physicians who are seeking help.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was an interesting study that I read that said before the pandemic, the difficulties began, and that it used to be in the old days that nurses who were applying for a job would ask what their salary would be. That was their first question. But it had shifted, this is several years before the pandemic, into the question of how will you keep me safe? And Laura has two friends, nurses who came to one of our retreats from San Francisco, actually, from General Hospital. And they are assaulted on a regular basis in the ER. They work in the ER. And a lot of hospitals are now giving healthcare professionals a button to push to call security to help them if they are subject to verbal assault or physical assault. And that's, it's a big switch because as far as I'm concerned, there was respect for our profession. When I started, there was great respect for the sacrifice that people made to become doctors and nurses and the daily sacrifice to care for people. But now it's sort of switched, it's become politicized, and people get attacked verbally and physically, and that's really a huge shift. And people think, why should I put up with this? But if enough people leave, maybe the system will have to change, what we call the system. So maybe hours and vacation policies will change. There's some places considering that the 12-hour shift, which they thought was great, maybe we should shift back to 8 hours. Maybe people start making more mistakes at the end of their 12 hours, which turns into 13, of course. And maybe pay will change. So we have 4 nurses in our family, and my daughter-in-law, who became a nurse, graduated right when the pandemic hit. She hit the hospital right during the pandemic. And she was working on a ward in a hospital that's religiously based in Southern Oregon. And they had to hire travel nurses. So she was working alongside people who were making 3 times the pay. And she had to orient them and train them. And some of them refused to do what she was doing. And that's like the cardinal rule of healthcare workers is don't make things harder for your colleagues. We're in this together. And that begins to fracture that rule. And even some of the nurses that she worked with at this hospital would call in sick so that they could go work as travel nurses in the next town and earn 3 times the income. And that just tells me that, as you like to say, Laura, the wheels are coming off the bus. So maybe we'll develop a new system that truly provides universal health care to people. This is when I get on my soapbox. You know, when I finished my fellowship in pediatrics, I thought, oh, in another couple of years, like all of the Western countries have done after World War II, we will develop universal health care in this country, because I'm tired of not doing tests that people need because they can't afford them, or procedures people need. And here I could die and that could not happen. And I've lived in countries with healthcare, universal healthcare, and it is such a gift to know that all the kids in your child's school have good healthcare, to know that your grandmother can get glasses and dental care, and mental health care. You know, just to know that that's available to everybody is a huge load off the heart. So it's my hope that that will happen. But until it happens, until things change, we need to know how to support ourselves if we want to continue in the work. Yeah. So now I get to ask Laura Martin, who has been doing actually the mindful medicine work for what, 7 years?
I think so. Yeah, we started in, well, maybe 8 or 9 now. Yeah.
Yeah, it started with a retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And one person who came, who was working at the university as a pediatric pulmonologist, said, you saved my life. I was going to quit, and now I can go back to my practice. So anyway, I want to ask you, what are you seeing in your practice with healthcare workers? And what have you seen happen in the mindful medicine PDX retreats that you've led? What's the secret sauce, and how does that work?
Yeah.
And do you think mindfulness practices actually help?
Yeah. Well, in working with individual healthcare workers, initially, I think it used to be, as you kind of said, harder to self-diagnose burnout. And there was also kind of a shame in that too. I went through that experience as well, having done a lot of work in community mental health, and it was hard to acknowledge at that time that I was really burnt out. It was, high volume, high intensity. And so, but now I think it's kind of obvious. It's almost expected that people are burnt out. That the system is keeps asking so much and so much more, and it's amazing how high functioning physicians and healthcare workers actually are, that the more that's asked for them, somehow they continue to deliver. It comes out of their hide. Somehow they can continue to do more with less, it seems. But I feel like we're reaching the end of that, and that maybe these systems are, another thing I like to say, killing the golden goose. It isn't sustainable anymore. And so a lot of the conversations that are being had is how to renegotiate the relationship to the field entirely. It may be, though, that some of these practices, if you can't make a move right away, that some of these practices really can be kind of a lifeline, that with the control that you do have over your own mind and heart, and the control that you can exert in your own day, can make a really big difference. And that's one of the causes of burnout, is the feeling of a lack of control, or the reality of a lack of control. And it just seems like professionals have less and less control. I think one of the aspects that you brought up too that's really important is feeling a sense of respect, this professional respect. The training is long, it's complicated, it's sometimes ethically fraught, and people really bring their whole selves to their work. This deserves respect. And so if that's not happening, and it may not even be a financial reward, but even just that appreciation goes a long way. And if that's not present, that's a requirement, I think. And just the lack of autonomy. I think it is difficult for people have to be fighting with insurance companies, taking their time to do that instead of doing the work that they want and need to be doing.
And someone
So,
added in the chat, there's the constant threat of medical malpractice suits
oh my gosh, right? Yeah. So you're
always
kind of
hanging over your head.
damned if you do, damned if you don't. And yeah, these are complicated life situations that people step into in service. So that needs to be recognized. There was a physician that once shared with me their way of thinking about it, that they have a covenant with their patients, but the insurance company has a contract. And there's something, there's sort of a larger responsibility there that professionals do take, and an ethical responsibility that I don't see the healthcare or the insurance companies having a similar oath. So what I think happens in our retreats and in our Wednesday night group is one of the required nutrients of professionals, and if it's missing, it's one of the causes of burnout, and that is community. So often we don't have time to talk to each other anymore. That again, the each minute is scheduled already tight, and you're ending up staying extra to do all your notes or doing your notes at home. There's no time to actually have a conversation with each other, and this is a way that we get to put that back into the equation. It really is the secret sauce to get professionals to be able to talk to each other, and it's so healing for them to be able to do that. It's really beautiful to get to see that in a place that's offers that kind of time and space to know they're not alone. It's really a remarkable gift to get to see, and we get to learn so much from each other too. And
one of the exercises that we sometimes do in the retreats is to talk about the patient you'll never forget. And it's never the patient that, miraculously got better and you're under your care. It's the patient that you killed or almost killed or think that you did, and that weighs so heavily on us. And to speak out loud about that, some people often cry talking about the situation that happened in their residency that they will never forgive themselves for. And then they get the perspective of other healthcare professionals on it. It's just very, very healing.
Yeah, we've yeah,
Go ahead.
We've seen so many, it provides such a rare opportunity to really acknowledge those really poignant experiences that only healthcare workers really can know. Yeah.
So we have some time for some questions.
I hope we get questions.
We're going to save a little time at the end. And somebody says, the covenants are all broken now, all over our society. The heartbreak and fear because of that is overwhelming. Yes. And insurance companies. So the covenant in medicine is you treat whoever comes in the door. You don't know if they're a Republican or a Democrat or how they voted or anything. But now you know, because there are arguments about vaccinations right there, and people wanting to take their dad home because you're killing them in the ICU. And then somebody else says, insurance companies don't seem to respect the healthcare professional's point of view. I can imagine it's terribly demoralizing. Dr. Glaukenflecken, I can't recommend, I'll put it in the chat. I can't recommend that enough. I try to end our mindful medicine encounter sometimes with something funny, so people can go to bed smiling, laughing, and he's hilarious. And
we're huge fans.
Yes,
around here.
He has these great imagined encounters, real encounters with insurance companies and with CEOs, which are great. So, do we have any questions?
Oh, there's more questions. Yeah, trying to keep things also the lightness as well. Okay, there's some questions coming. Yeah, we'll end with one of his couple of minute skits, or just a poem or something. Okay, here's a question. I'm a healthcare chaplain. What I'm seeing with our caregivers is something like moral injury. Wonder what your perspective on that is. Yes, thank you. Moral injury is a term that originated in the military and finds its way very appropriately into the field of medicine. It is when people are subjected to situations that bring their the authority that they are needing to put their trust in, bringing those morals into question, or violation of morals within the system, and either witnessing or having to make impossible decisions that then violate one's own moral code in the process. And so this continues to be an appropriate way of looking at the situations that healthcare professionals are being placed in, especially with this tension between the contract of health insurance and profit versus the human and the origin of the oath that healthcare providers, healthcare professionals originally and continue to have to be responsible for. And so having to make impossible decisions or decisions that feel terrible or that are feeling like a violation of that covenant, where healthcare provider can't do what they know they need to do, when they can't provide in a way that they know they need to, it's incredibly demoralizing. It's harmful. And this too is it's sometimes being used in another way to talk about burnout. I don't think these two things are necessarily mutually exclusive or that we're not suffering burnout, but I think moral injury brings a different element to it. It really brings in this kind of a spiritual injury into the identifying what's actually happening out there. So yes, thank you for bringing that forward.
I actually say that not having universal health care in a country that promises life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is itself moral injury.
Yeah.
Oh, I got on my soapbox again.
That's this is why we don't have any conflicts of interests here. Our mindful medicine is its own nonprofit, and so we're here for you, not representing any of the other companies. I love Jan that you talked about Nurse Blake too on YouTube. If you're not familiar with Nurse Blake, he's amazing. Very funny.
A great episode where he pretends to be a CEO of a large hospital corporation. And he says, you know, I know you're working hard and like we could give you more money, but then you just have more taxes and we could give you vacation time, but really, where would you go on vacation? And then, so we just want to say, thank you.
We do laugh a lot at these, it turns out. You have to have a sense of humor.
You can't survive without it.
No. Any other questions?
Here's somebody who says, I'm an oncology nurse turned lawyer and leadership coach who just had a stem cell transplant. My nurses told me they were burnt out, yet they delivered incredible care. How can we support your work? Well, what's nice about you all maybe being in the same time zone, although we have people coming from different time zones to mindful medicine. And it's totally a drop-in thing. You know, sometimes people come and we don't see them for a month or two, and then, or even 5 years, we've had people come and say,
Years later.
I went to a retreat 5 years ago and it was so helpful and I need help now.
Mhm.
So you can refer them to Mindful Medicine PDX.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
And
also other resources in the book too,
Yeah.
of other retreats and people who are doing great things to support healthcare providers.
And they, if they want, you can give them the gift of the book.
There you go.
I gave my own private doctor, my own personal doctor, a copy of the book.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we do our
We do a
little
practice.
practice?
Oh, okay, great.
Okay. So this is an example of a practice that healthcare providers can use themselves, and you can also teach it to patients. So it's called a body scan with gratitude, and I'm just going to give you a shortened version. So please get a comfortable position wherever you're seated. And you can lower your eyelids or close your eyes, whatever is comfortable for you. And if you would first bring complete, full awareness to your entire body, this body that sits and breathes. If you can't see it, how do you know it exists? With the raw data. Perhaps there are sensations of touch, which are very light and tingly throughout the body, or maybe there are stronger sensations of pressure beneath your feet or your seat or arms, or where parts of your body touch each other. So just becoming fully aware of this raw data that we have a body that's sitting and breathing. Now we're going to turn the light of our inner awareness to our eyes. So please bring your full attention to your eyes. If you can't see your eyes, how do you know that you have eyes? So perhaps there's a slight sensation of movement or of roundness, like you can feel that there's a globe, the eye is shaped like a globe. Or perhaps some moisture or dryness. And then, of course, even if our eyelids are closed, we can perceive colors, light and dark, and perhaps colors and perhaps shapes. So that's one clue that we have eyes. And then before we move our awareness to another part of the body, please say silently, thank you, eyes, for, and leave a blank space and see if anything arises in that blank space. Thank you, eyes, for. Now we'll move that light of awareness to another part of the body. Let's move it to the feet. What are the sensations that tell you you have feet if you can't see them? Perhaps sensations of temperature, warmth, or coolness, different parts of the feet. Perhaps sensations of touch from socks or shoes. Perhaps sensations of a little bit of movement. How do you know you have feet? Resting in full awareness in your feet. And then silently say, thank you, feet, for, and leave a blank. And see if anything arises in that space or not. Thank you, feet, for. And now, please move the light of awareness to your heart, your physical heart. How do you know that there's a physical heart in your chest? Do you feel motion or do you feel a pulse? Notice coolness. I don't know what you're feeling. How do you know that you have a heart? And then silently say, thank you, heart, for And lastly, if you would move your awareness to a part of your body that's maybe not functioning optimally, maybe having some trouble. So I just had a partial knee replacement, so I'm going to move my awareness to my right knee. So all of the sensations rising from that part of the body. How would you describe them to somebody else? Warmth, coolness, prickly sensations, sensations of discomfort. Are they steady? Are they intermittent? Sensations of tension. And then silently say, thank you. Name that body part. Thank you for, and see if anything arises in that blank space or not. I'm going to say, thank you, me, for. So now if you would bring your awareness back to your entire body, wrap your body in a cocoon of awareness. And again, thank you, body, for. And thank you, everyone, for trying out this exercise. It's one of our favorites, one of my favorites. I like to do it when I get grumpy about my body. Like my knee that had surgery. I do physical therapy, I get grumpy about it. But you know, nothing thrives under negative attention. And often body parts that are having trouble, we just direct negative attention continually to them. And we know that children and plants and pets don't thrive under negative attention. So our poor body parts that we're angry at, upset with, as you may have seen, trying its very best. And you know, for healthcare professionals, you can say, okay, bring your awareness to your pancreas.
Right where it is.
Or your spleen or your bladder.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends on your audience.
Right.
So thank you everyone so much for participating with us.
Thank you.
I'm glad we had a good time. That was very fun. I hope everybody had learned something today. And I hope everybody, if you had any questions that you didn't manage to ask, is there a way to contact you, Jan or Laura? Email or anything like that through your websites?
Yeah. What shall we put in the chat?
Just if it's your if it's your website or something to that effect, then they can find it that way, I guess.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you one last time to everybody. Just the book today is Mindful Medicine. If you'd like to go grab that, make sure you go to bookpassage.com. You can again find it through the very first link in the description just below the video. We can ship it to your house just like any other online retailer. Thank you one last time. I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank
Is
you.
it mindfulmedicinepdx.org or
.org.
.org?
.org.
That's what I thought. Okay.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.